Good evening. And if you're just tuning in, you are listening live to 105.3 FM out of Mississippi and 107.7 FM out of the beautiful city of New Orleans. And this is UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio Network. And this is the Angel Rock. I'm your host, Laura Lee Potvin. If you've never been here before, welcome. And if you are returning, we have a great crew of people here watching live and interacting. Welcome. Just so you guys know, this is not a repeat. This was pre-recorded a few hours earlier just due to the time difference with our guest. So this is a new episode. I want to let you guys know that. A little bit about myself. I'm a Canadian psychic medium, crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner, spiritual teacher, and mentor. I'm also a registered nurse. I'm well versed in near-death experiences, having had one as a toddler myself and studied them over 40 years professionally and personally. And I'm extremely well versed in the paranormal. Like I always say, I didn't go looking for the paranormal. It found me. And we have shared some of our story on the Travel Channel's Paranormal Survivor, Season 4, Episode 9. I did not name it, but it's called Demonic Hauntings. You can find it on YouTube. I believe it's on Netflix and many other places. Certainly interesting, I'll say, demonstration of what we went through, some of the things. So please check it out if you get a chance. Now, I have, if you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe. Please forgive my voice. We're going on 6 weeks of this. I finally gave in. I'm on antibiotics. So hopefully by this Thursday, I will have more of a voice. And by Thursday, I mean I have a second show on the network with my friend and co-host David Hansel, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and it's called The Thing at the Foot of the Bed. And like I said, was starting to say, if you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell all your friends and family, because there really is something for everyone on this network. It's not all just UFO and paranormal. I believe we are up to almost 40 live hosts, and so we stream multiple shows live 7 days a week. And when we're not streaming live, the archive server kicks into the last 25 plus years this network has been around and streams. It just randomly picks different shows. So there really is something for everyone here. If you'd like, I always say, if you can't see us, you can't join the conversation. Now, tonight won't be quite the same because this has been pre-recorded, but please feel free to comment. If you're watching this, you can comment. So it'll be on Facebook under my profile. It's on our new channel. It's actually our backup channel, UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials on YouTube, my YouTube channel, The Angel Rock with Laura Lee Potvin. I'm going to try and stream it to TikTok again tonight under The Angel Rock, as well as Instagram under The Angel Rock. Just so you know, on Instagram, sometimes it kicks out after an hour. So if you see that the show cuts off, it's just random when it does it. Please check it out on some of the other profiles. I believe we are also on, I'm thinking from memory, on Rumble. It's under Mystique 1508, which is my account. It's an old account. The name comes from X-Men. That's why there's a character by that name. And I believe we're on Twitch, UFO Gods and UFO Paranormal and United Public. Sorry, my brain is not working, guys. I'm getting with it here. It's under UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio. So join in the chat. We've got a great group of people that you guys can make comments, ask questions. We do try to check the comments after, and we'll try and answer them for you if you do have questions. What else do I want to tell you guys? The last thing, if you guys want to watch us on TV, you can. The network has its own TV channel, and it's on Roku. You're going to go to the channel store, go in the search box, and type in UFO space P as in paranormal. There's a drop-down list that'll come down. We're about the third or fourth one down, and if you click on UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio, that's how you can watch us. Now, on to my very patient guest, and before I introduce her, this is her third appearance, and I hope not her last. I would love to have her on. You have all told me how much you love her, and she's absolutely delightful. If you're wondering why her camera is blurred, it's because once we get in, we're going to do a little bit of a recap of why we first connected and started doing a few shows together, because it's about, well, I'll wait till I read her bio and then I'll kick it in there. But if you're wondering, there's a reason why. So I'm going to read her biography. Give me a minute. Her name is Jes Kerzen. Now, she is over in the UK, so it's quite late if we were doing this live. So that's why we pre-record the show for you. She's a special education English teacher and author. We're going to be talking still about her book, A Mind Beyond Words, which is a poignantly compelling spiritual memoir about the strong, unusual bond forged between school teacher Jes and a 6-year-old autistic boy, Asher. Now, that's the reason why. Now, Asher is not his real name, and we keep Jes's identity also blurred because Asher is an extremely, extremely, extremely gifted young man now, and just keeps everybody safe because he has gifts that, yeah, some people may want to use for their own. And this way, nobody should be using anybody's gifts for their own. They're for ours. And if we choose to share them with the rest of the world, great. A little bit more about her bio. Asher arrived in her class and changed the trajectory of both their lives. And while Jes taught Asher to communicate by speaking, Asher taught Jes telepathy, his first language. Their journey together, sometimes tragic, sometimes joyful, spans 25 years and leads them into an exploration of psychic and supernatural abilities. Once Jes had mastered telepathic communication, Asher, freed from the limitation of using words to communicate, could share with us his astonishing wisdom and information derived from what he terms the realms, a spiritual dimension beyond time and space. And in this book, together they discuss such topics as creation, the afterlife, and the potential of neurodivergent thinkers in expanding human experience, as well as contributing to the latest debates about consciousness as a universal field in which we all participate. Welcome, Jes.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you so much for having me on again. It's lovely to be back.
Well, as I was telling you before we started recording, every time I've mentioned you were on in October, I got to check. I've actually put the link in the write-up that I'm going to be putting once I put this into StreamYard to air to all the platforms. I'm going back to the first time. So you were on for the first time July 22nd in 2024. Second episode was Monday, obviously, with the Angel Rock, October 14th. So this is your third appearance. So let's give people a little bit of a refresher for people that may be watching this for the first time, if you don't mind, about how you met Asher and made the connection with him.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do apologize to everybody that I look blurry. It's not your eyes, as Laura Lee's explained.
Yeah.
Asher is, he's now a young man in his 30s, and he's an autistic gentleman. He's a very, very private gentleman. And although he was more than happy for me to do appearances like this, he said, I don't want your face to be clearly shown because I don't want people recognizing you and then working out who I am. So that's the reason. And I absolutely respect his feelings for that. And I'm really grateful to Laura Lee, who's happy to have this sort of weird, blurry old lady on the other end of the line.
I've had people not on camera even. They prefer for us to have our guests on camera because podcasting's become a pretty big thing, and I realized I've been doing podcasting before even was called podcasting.
Really?
But I have actually when the iPhone.
So you started a trend.
No, but when the iPhone came out in the US, it didn't come to Canada for a year later. But I won one when they came out, and I had no clue how I was going to get this phone to work. And I've always been very interested in technology. I've taught myself some computer technology, programming language, and things like that. So I found a community of computer experts, if you will. And so we used to go on Blog Talk Radio and teach people all about the wonderful things about the iPhone and what have you. But it wasn't called podcasting back then.
Well, so, there you go.
Yeah. So I was
trendsetter.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said you're a real trendsetter.
Well, I don't know if it's that. It's just, you know what it is? I've been off a long time with hurting my back as a nurse, and television gets old very quickly. And I have the kind of brain I always have. I always have to be moving, learning, doing something to keep my brain fresh and active, I guess. So that was part of the reason why.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So with Asher, so you said you were a special ed teacher, and he came into your classroom?
He came into my class. I was working with children with speech and language difficulties. That was the primary reason they were there. And this was back at the end of the last century. It makes me sound ancient, doesn't it?
You know what kids are calling people that were born they're calling it the late 1900s. Like my eldest was born 1995, and young kids are, well, he would have been born in the late 1900s.
Yeah, I know, it sounds so ancient, doesn't it?
It does, excuse me.
Historical people, but Asher was also born in the late 1900s.
Yes.
And yes, so he was one of many, many, many children who came into my class. I only had 10 kids at a time in the class, but there was quite a quick turnover. So they'd come in for maybe 2 or 3 terms, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how much of a problem they had with speaking and understanding. And we'd work very intensively with them. And the idea was to get them through and get them out the other end so that they could go back into a mainstream school, into an ordinary teaching environment. And we were under a lot of pressure because we were always being told there's a whole load more kids waiting and they're absolutely desperate for a place. So, just get working on them. So it was like a factory, really. You were sort of racing these kids through, but trying your hardest to make sure that they would manage it. So he turned up partway through the school year because another child had just left a space. And I'd been doing the job about 7 years by then, so I wasn't new to it, but this kid was different. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. It took me quite a few weeks to work out that the class just wasn't running the way it used to once he arrived. And one of the things he did, because this is the interesting thing about children who don't learn to speak like everybody else, they don't get worded language sort of coming in and blocking out all the intuitive, telepathic understanding that most of us get once we start using words. So you'll get little kids who are developing normally, maybe will gradually, they'll stop having those kind of telepathic experiences that every child has when they're a baby, don't they? Because they haven't got the other way of communicating. So, and so these children hadn't really lost that because they still didn't use spoken language or not intelligibly. But Asher took it to a whole new level, and he realized that these other children in the class, he could communicate with them into their minds. So he was doing this sort of mind-to-mind beaming with the other kids. And I was finding, I didn't know why, but I was finding my lessons were just going crazy. I'd be trying to teach them something and they'd all be giggling away about something that I had no idea what was going on. And it was and I sort of looked around and thought, well, why is this happening? It's never happened before. I haven't changed the way I work. And I thought the only thing that's changed is this new little boy, Asher. And so I watched him very carefully, and sure enough, he was orchestrating this, I suppose. And then I, as I've told you before, but I'll repeat it, so that other people who are just tuning in can find out. Yeah, after I made completely certain that he was the one who was messing up all my lessons, I took him aside and I said, why are you doing this? Why are you messing up all my lessons? And he just looked at me and he had this huge, huge smile on his face and his eyes were shining. And he went, so you, and he couldn't speak very well, but he told me as best he could that he'd been searching since he was about 3 or 4 for a person he remembered making what he called a deal with before he was born. And he knew before he incarnated into this life that there would be another person. He said he knew it would be a female, and he knew it would be some sort of authority figure. That person was the person he'd made this deal with in spirit, that we would work together because we had work to do. And there I am sitting there, a sort of middle-aged
I would have
classroom
been
teacher.
blown away. I would have been, had I never, forayed into this field, to have a child to be able to communicate that and tell you that. What was your reaction?
I was blown away, but there was something in it that, I don't say I remembered this. I didn't remember it at all. But there was just something about him, and something about how clever he'd been to communicate this stuff, and to search for me in that way. And I just believed him, and I just thought, he's not messing me about. No 6-year-old child is going to make up a story like that.
They wouldn't tell you that at that age.
No,
I've yet to meet a kid that would be able to tell you something like that at that age.
Yeah. Well, I'd had enough. I mean, good grief. I was in my late 40s by then. I'd been teaching all my working life. I knew kids, and I knew, mischievous kids and naughty kids, and I'd had no end of discussions with them. But nothing had prepared me for this little boy who was doing this. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just believe him. So I said, well, all right, so what are we supposed to be doing together? And he said that I was to be his helper. And initially I just thought, well, that means I'm going to help him to learn to speak, which is lucky because that's what I'm paid to do. And so I got on with it. But it quickly became apparent that there was a lot more to our relationship than me teaching him to speak. So, that's where it all started.
Did you believe in telepathy before?
That's a very good question. I've never thought about it. I don't know. I don't think I disbelieved, but it wasn't something. No, it was just something that I'd never come across. I'd heard the word, and I knew it from sci-fi programs and stuff like that. It was something I was aware of, but it was not something that I thought I would ever be party to. It wasn't something I thought I'd ever take part in. And yet I became fascinated. And the more I watched him, and the more I watched him interacting with the other children in the class, the more I thought that I really wanted to find out more about this. I really wanted to understand it. And looking back, he'd definitely taken it upon himself that he was going to teach me this. And the reason was he was already discovering that words just weren't enough. I mean, I've taken to thinking of Asher now as there's been a lot of talk recently about the non-verbal autistic people and, the very special role that they play. But I think Asher is post-verbal. I think he came into my class, he learned to speak, he actually got very good at it, and he can get by now in a sort of semi-autonomous way. He can manage his life. He's got a job. He goes to work each day. And obviously he has to speak in order to do his work. And he finds words are fine just for everyday, ordinary things when you're talking about material stuff. But when you want to talk about the things that he wants to talk about, the things he wants me to share with other people, words don't really work for them. Something like energy or dimensions or even love. He says they're tight little boxes. They're little things that don't allow you to reach the whole fullness of what I'm trying to express. And he said there aren't any words to explain all that stuff. So he's kind of divided himself into two halves, and there's the part of him who gets on with his daily life and tries hard to mask his autism in front of other people and just gets on with being as regular a bloke as he can be, if you like. And then there's this other side who talks to me purely through telepathy, and that is that way he can just deliver all that he wants to tell me and show me and share with me in a kind of great blob of information that just comes into my head. And then my job is to try and find words to express that and explain it and write it down and share it with other people in books and on podcasts and wherever.
That, you know what, like, I know in the way, and I've talked about my son has passed away. We talked about this before. If it came up, I'm comfortable speaking about this. But in a way, you know, and I find as a mother with both of my boys that I have this telepathic link, for example. Now, maybe it's because what I do, I believe that children become more aware. You know, I never pushed it on my kids, but they lived with a woo-woo mother for many years, as I call this world. But my eldest will say to me, again, I'm going to tell this story. This still blows my mind. Last Christmas, not this Christmas, I was talking to their father about getting my youngest, who had autism, a PlayStation 4. And we had found a really good secondhand one. And I said, I'll get a hold of our oldest son just to get him to check it out and make sure, you know, we're getting the right thing. Literally ended the conversation, and my eldest son texted me and said, "Hey, Mom, what do you want to talk to me about?" I said, "Were you just speaking to your father?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, how did you know I want to talk to you?" And he sends me a picture, and it's like a crystal, like dragonfly. And I said, "What is this? Like, where are you?" He said his fiance and him at the time were shopping at one of the local, it's a beautiful greenhouse, but they really do it up for Christmas. And it was a dragonfly. And he said, "Well, every time I see a dragonfly, I know you want to speak to me." And I was blown away because he's figured that out. Or he will say to me sometimes, he'll start a sentence and then he'll say, because he's got such a sense of humor, he'll say, "Woman, get out of my head," as I finish the rest of his sentence. But it's possible, I believe, for all of us to be telepathic if we were open to it and being taught how to access it. So how did you make the connection? Like, how did Asher teach you? Are you able to share some of that?
In stages, I think. It was a very gradual thing because, as you know yourself, there's different levels of telepathy. I mean, what I'm doing with him now is downloading huge amounts of information and writing them all down in a book, my questions, his answers, and it's quite complex. But to begin with, it was nothing like that. It was much more like a gut feeling, or that feeling of being stared at. You know, you suddenly sort of realize somebody was looking at you from behind and you couldn't see them, but you felt all the hairs on the back of your neck prickling and that kind of thing, or you just got this gut feeling. And most of the early stuff with him was that sort of thing, but I feel that he and some of his friends in the class, because there were several of them in on the act, they were kind of preparing me, training me very gently. So it started off just with that. There was one little boy who could speak into my head, and he's the only person I've ever come across who does that, where I actually physically heard his voice, you know, and I knew it was his voice because he had a particular way of talking. And I think they were just trying out these different methods. Let's see if she can pick this sort out. Let's see if she can pick that sort out. Let's see if she gets this feeling. And so they were training me, just like you train a dog to do new tricks and when to fetch and when to come to
But
heel.
that's how this works. Like, I often talk about a friend of mine, Augie Nost, and he has something called the Mastermind Connection on Sundays. I believe there's a couple with his Patreon that are paid throughout the week, and sometimes they will practice techniques like this. They will talk about, say, manifestation, connect with off-worlders. There's all kinds of incredible things. He had sent me a video on brain yoga, it's called, to help connect both sides of the brain. Like, and it's just a quick exercise. And I believe they do it over in Scandinavia with children and like young children. And it's just a series of movements that you do. It takes 30 seconds a day to connect both sides of the brain. But he had talked about on one of my shows about telepathy. And he said, next time somebody's, I think it's NQ or online, and you've got at the shopping center, you're waiting to pay, and somebody's up in front of you, I got to turn around for a sec. He said, always, if you can, stare at the nape of the neck right here. And he said, focus and think within the mind space, because it's not like we're hearing voices. I try to explain to people it's in your mind, but again, you can pick out where it's coming from, because it's how psychic mediumship works as well for me anyways. So he said, stare at the nape of the neck and keep repeating, turn around, turn around, turn around. And I've warned people it probably won't work the first time. And I was so happy to see that one of our regular viewers was in the comments, and she said she was so excited, and she shared, this is a couple of weeks ago, I've been practicing that, and she said now I can do it really quickly. And she said it's so funny because people turn around and think you're talking to them and you haven't said a word. She goes, it works.
Yeah. It's like, if you're training your muscles, if you're trying to sort of run a marathon and you're doing exercises to strengthen your leg muscles and what have you, then strengthen your heart, the more you practice little bits every day, the stronger it gets. And I think psychic skills are no different.
They aren't.
It's the same sort of thing. We've all got the capacity, every one of us. It's just that we've been socialized out of it, I suppose. We've been given this kind of, oh no, we don't do that sort of thing, that's made up. And little children are sort of told, no, you can't really see, great granny in the corner of the room.
Yes,
You're just making up stories, but they can, and they do, and they're having conversations with these people. But maybe the parents aren't ready or able to accept that, and so they just say to the kid, oh no, you're making up a story. But I mean, there are so many very, very careful accounts of things like that. You can't not believe it, really. But it freaks some people out, and that's their learning curve, really. But
I was just going to share, I was always concerned with the numbers with autism diagnoses rising from when my son Justin, so it would have been about 26 years ago or so, he was diagnosed. It was 1 in 10,000 boys. And depending on where you live now, it can be anywhere from 1 in 32, I think, to 1 in 48 children being diagnosed. But the one thing I wanted to share, one time he told me when he was finally able to speak, because he spoke very late in life, he still always had some limitations. But he said to me one day, he said, Mommy, he says, guess what? And I said, what? He goes, I know what the animals are always thinking. And I said, really? That's wonderful. Because my eldest could always speak to animals as well. And then he said, and you know what else, Mommy? He goes, I have a superpower. And I go, what's your superpower? And he said, my autism. It was kind of like, duh, Mom. And I'm almost wondering, because I believe even when you get into the work of Temple Grandin, for example, and for people that don't know who she is, look her up. There was a movie out there with Claire Danes showing parts of her life, but she's been, I think, very instrumental. Not that everybody thinks the same way, but sort of helping parents to try to understand the way somebody with autism may be processing and thinking versus a neurotypical, as they call us, the normies. And it's been very, very helpful. And I think that's part of it. That because my son was very psychic, as is my eldest, very powerful psychically as well. Like, I remember one time he was very ill, and I didn't ask this person, but they decided they were sending him healing. And they told me that, and I tried to tell them, he doesn't know who you are. He may not let you in. And she wrote me back an hour later, and she said, nope, no how, no way. So it's almost like I almost feel that these well, they're not kids, human beings that are coming in with this diagnosis are almost coming in with this super connectedness to source, if you will, to the other side. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I couldn't agree with you more. And Asher is saying to me, yes, there are more coming now, because every one of us, when we're still in spirit, have a choice. He talks, this is what part of what we're writing our new book about, because we've
Okay.
started on a new book.
I can't
And
wait.
oh, you're going to have to. It's taking a long time to put it
I have
together.
3 books I've been writing forever, so I'm not giving you a hard time.
I've got this pile of notebooks like this with all our conversations in, and I've got them marked up with, I don't know if you could see, there's one of them here. Can you see all those
Oh my
post-its
goodness.
in it?
Yes.
And they're all color coded with, this is in part 1 and this color is in part 2. So they're all, oh gosh, and there's a whole pile of them. So it's just a matter of pulling all this material out and putting it. But anyway, back to what I was saying, this new book, he wants to talk about why people incarnate with autism. And he says it is not a mistake, and it is not an abnormality, and it is something they've done completely intentionally. And the way he explains it is it's typical Asher. You know how he uses all these kind of metaphors for trying to explain in everyday terms what's going on. And he said, well, the brain, it's like a filter. And I've found sort of writers, there was a guy called Henri Bergson, I think, who was writing back about 100 years ago, who came up with this sort of filter thing. And there's various other people who've got theories like this, that the brain isn't just there to take in all this information, it's actually to keep a lot of stuff out, because if we had all the stuff that we've got in spirit and we were trying to live in 3D, it would completely blow us away. So he said, imagine these filters. And he said, imagine your ordinary neurotypical skeptical materialist person has got a filter. And he said, it's such a fine mesh. It's like a coffee filter. So there's not much can get in. There's not much light can get in. They can just pick up the ordinary everyday stuff, but they haven't got much else coming in. And he said, you get people like you, he said, talking to me, he said, you're probably more like a tea strainer. So you've got slightly bigger holes in yours because you're picking up a bit more. And he said, he said, I'm more like a kitchen sieve. So, I've got even bigger holes. So sort of you'd sift your flour in or something like that. And he said, then you've got the non-speaking autistic people who, bless them, they've come in with such compromised bodies that maybe they can't function by themselves. They're going to need carers. They're going to need help. They're not going to be able to wash their socks and go out and buy their shopping in and cook.
That was my son. That was my son.
But they're here for another purpose. So he said they're like a garden sieve. They're like, great big of centimeter big holes that, they let loads and loads of light in, and they've got so much coming from spirit that they're only partly embodied. They're only partly in the human body, and they're here, but they're here to do really important stuff. They're here to share that knowledge and to bring humanity up to a level where we can start to use this telepathy, start to link in the way that they do, start to move towards this shift and new paradigm. So they're doing an absolutely vital job. And that's how he explains it.
I agree. And again, speaking about my own son, of course, I couldn't feel what he was feeling, but he actually, I believe, telepathically was trying to show me for him what it was like with autism, with the fact that he didn't have the regular filter. So he could literally give to me, say, sitting in a doctor's office. feeling every seam in your clothing, feeling the seat on your bottom, hearing every little noise, that fan in the way back room that nobody else can hear, the ticking of the clock, the weird smells, the fluorescent lights. So the reason why he gave me this, I think, was for me to try to understand as his advocate, you know, never mind the other stuff, like what you just explained, that he didn't have the filters to filter out all of this material stuff that we neurotypicals would. Yet again, having that connection to the other side, like what you just explained. And even though he may not have had the words, he would have these moments of wisdom that would come out, and you'd say, where did that come from? And you know, or the telepathy, a lot of the telepathy. And you had said something else. Let me go back to just one sec here. It was something Asher had shared. It'll come back when we're talking, but I can really relate to what Asher is saying. And again, although I couldn't feel what my son was feeling, you know, and it really helped a lot of people, say, trying to understand somebody's, and I don't know if this happens to Asher or not, but somebody that would be higher functioning under the spectrum, for example, would be at work. And when things really get to be a lot, somebody might have a meltdown once in a while, and people would be like, whoa, where did that come from? But once they're able to understand that, maybe even though we didn't have those physical filters in place as somebody under the spectrum, and not everybody's the same, you could see why one little thing piled on top could just cause a meltdown. And when it comes to the nonverbal, I used to go to the Geneva Center in Toronto. They had a biannual autism conference. And again, this wasn't the only person I saw, but it was a really big moment. Temple Grandin was interviewing, and I think we may have talked about him, Tito, over in India, who uses the assisted typing method with his mother. And I remember when Temple asked him, if your mother hadn't figured out this link between you and this typing, because he would be one of these people I would describe that sort of has one world in the physical, but very much connected to the other side. And what he typed was, if my mom had not made this connection, I would have been a vegetable. There was not a dry eye in the room, because this young man was so intelligent, so much to share, so much to say. But people look at someone like him and thinking there's nothing going on in there. And there are more and more people that are actually taking the time to make these connections. Have you seen that yourself?
Absolutely, I have. I've been working tangentially with Kai Dickens. Have you heard of Kai Dickens and the telepathy tapes, which is
down.
Yeah, it's a podcast series.
Okay.
So her name's Kai, K-Y, and then Dickens, like the author. And it's called the Telepathy Tapes.
Oh, I'm looking that one up.
And it did go pretty viral. I mean, around Christmas, New Year time, it was sort of knocking Joe Rogan off the top slot of
good for her
podcast charts. And she didn't have any funding. She just went out. She met somebody who told her about children. Their child reads this person said this child reads my mind. And then she found this Harvard professor who said she'd been studying what she believed were savants, autistic savants, but then she realized that it wasn't that they were savants and just knew this stuff. It was that they were picking up what somebody else was doing. So she went into it, and between the two of them, they did tests on various young people and children all around the States. And Asher and I were on a couple of episodes. And
I'm definitely watching them.
So, but again and again and again, they were finding that these people, and I mean, there was one young lad on there, he had been nonverbal up until he was 17 before he learned to speak. And even then he couldn't say very much, and he was what they call a speller, so he was using one of those boards that they press on, and a lot of people just say, oh no, that's that. that's not really their thought. Somebody's guiding them or somebody's moving their hand, because there's so many people do not want to believe that these non-verbal people with the compromised bodies, who's, maybe their head's lolling about and they're drooling and they don't look like there's anything going on at all between the ears, and they've got these amazing minds. And
Yes.
it just, once this young man was sort of given the opportunity to type, he was saying such profound things. He was sharing such amazing information. And just like Justin was doing for you, there was, so much that they needed to share, and they had to find some way of getting it through. And with some it's telepathy, and with some it's spelling. And yeah, it's incredible, but it just all seems to be building at this time. And that's, I think, why her podcast just went viral, because people who knew nothing about the subject were suddenly sort of saying, whoa, this is, just this morning I got a message from a lady who just listened through these programs, and she said, this has absolutely blown me away. I didn't know where I was going with my life. I didn't know what to do. And now I just had to find you. I had to get in touch with you and tell you, this is what I want to do with my life. And she's nothing to do with the autism world, but I want to help these people. I want to do something. I want to move on this journey. And I said, well, you've made the first step. You've put that intention out there, and it's just going to come trickling in. There's going to be a conversation with somebody, or there's going to be something you read, or there's going to be just something you happen to watch on YouTube, and you sort of think, whoa, yeah, that's where I'm going next. And this, I get 2 or 3 messages like that a week, and that's just me. And Kai is getting gazillions. She's getting so many, she's had to take on an assistant to help her answer them all. It's just, there is so many people, ordinary people, just realizing that there's something here, and these people we've been writing off, just far from it. They're really, really ready to start sharing their gifts with us.
I have always been very passionate, whether it's been a nurse or a mother of a child who was nonverbal, and Justin could hold a conversation with you, and invariably every time he'd be tested, because he always kept telling me there was nothing wrong with him as a child, and I'd say, I love him more than life itself, and I'm his mother. I am telling you, this is what it is. Thank God for the doctor that I had, that I used to work with in the NICU. It's the only way I got his diagnosis as a child, because, they would come to the home or wherever, and Justin, I think, had a photographic memory. So he would watch stuff back in the old day with VCR tapes and the TV, and he'd fast forward, rewind, fast forward, rewind, fast forward, rewind, and he'd commit it to memory. And he'd walk in like a little professor, and they might say, oh, Justin, do you like Pokemon? Talking very simple. And Justin would rattle off this like 10 line thing, and they'd be astounded. And I'd say, you do know that he probably committed that to memory. He probably has no idea, the whole concept of what he's telling you, because it just would work that way. But I've been so passionate about the fact that everybody needs a communication system. Yeah. And behavior doesn't happen out of the blue. But people that don't have a way for others to be able to understand them, right? Or people get written off, like just about what we're talking about, that I think this is such a beautiful thing that Kai has started this podcast, and like inspiring people to want to know more and work more with this. Because my belief is, and I'd love to hear if Asher's ever told you this, I think once upon a time ago, centuries ago, that human beings were telepathic naturally. This was their communication. Has he talked to you about that at all?
He has indeed, yeah.
I figured.
And you're right on. He would agree with you 100% there, Laura. He's absolutely, he says people existed without speech for way longer than speech just came along right at the end. In terms of the whole of, humanity, you've got these sort of years and years and years and years where they're like the animals. I mean, you know, a herd of wildebeest, they're not chatting away to each other. They're not making sounds that are words, but they've all got that communication system. Every sort of creature, and as we were saying earlier, newborn babies, before they've got spoken language, they've got all of that. And the non-speakers, bless them, don't lose it. So it's so much better as a way of communicating. I mean, I feel blessed. I feel absolutely blessed that I've got somebody who can share things with me. And it isn't just a matter of telling me this, this, and this in words. It's just sharing the whole experience. So if he wants to tell me something, what it's like in the realms that he visits, this sort of other dimension that he goes to, I get the colors and I get the feelings and I get the sounds and I get, you know, the feeling of the fresh, I don't know if it's air, I don't know what it is, but the fresh whatever it is on my face and the space of the place, the whole thing, just like I'm there.
What would you call that? Do you think it would be like a shared remote viewing experience, or he helps assist you into that dimension, or does he send it to you, or you just haven't figured it out, but you experience it?
We've coined the term astral envelopes, which is entirely our own creation, just because if you imagine an envelope and somebody wants to put in a whole, let's say somebody wants to send you the experience of their holiday. So they're putting in maybe some postcards and they're putting in some photos they've taken and they're putting in a little piece of something that some rocks and shells that they picked up on the beach, and they're putting in a bit of sand, and they're putting in, I don't know, something that they've bought in one of the little shops, and there's all these different bits, and then they seal down the envelope and give you that and say, this is my holiday, and you've got that experience. So yeah, so and an astral envelope is that with bells on, really, because you know there's even more than that to it.
I have so many questions. So are you able to because I still want to remember, we talked before we went on air about this incredible remote viewing experience, and I'm going to make sure we talk about that because it sounds like it's profound and you haven't shared it yet. You said it was in November.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about, I love to talk about dimensions. My best friend that's working on a course, and I'll tell more about it towards the end of the show, her and I connected instantly years ago. We were in a group and a class together, and it's like we've known each other for a year, you know, many lifetimes, and we know we have. But that's one thing we always love to get into conversations about: dimensions, timelines, things like this. So has Asher been able to obviously give you some of the experience of what he's experiencing visiting other dimensions? And I know physically he's not going, but for people trying to hear this concept, has he been able to give you any names of it? Or, and I know that's a human thing, or, you know, is this a unique dimension he goes to, or how does he even do it? And anything that's off limits, feel free to let me know it's off limits. But I know people are going to be thinking this too. What's going on?
Well, what little I can tell you, I will tell you. I mean, I'm only subject to what he tells me.
Absolutely.
He started telling me when he was back in his teens, and back in those days, he was just getting things spontaneously without. Nowadays, he's much more able to control it. Mm-hmm. He can choose to go out of body. He can choose where he goes to, mm-hmm. except he'd tell me off the court saying where, because there's no time and no space there. Absolutely. So mm-hmm. You see what I mean? Yeah. But I remember him saying to me when he was about 15 or 16, you know, I just find myself in this other place. But he said, I can't explain it to you because there aren't any words in the human language to explain it. So you just have to accept that it exists. And mm-hmm. he tried to show me how to get there. And, you know, he hadn't read any books on it. He hadn't watched any videos on it. This was just personal experience. And I remember him saying to me, make your eyes go all blurry and just stare straight ahead of you and sort of half close your eyes, blur them a bit, and act like you're going to sleep, but stay awake. And
That's hard.
I found it impossible. And I sort of sat there trying to do this. And then about 5 minutes in, he just sort of went, oh, I've looked into your mind and you're not ready. You're just not ready. And I'm afraid I'm still not ready, Laurie. I still
you know what it is, though? I want to add this quickly. Sorry, I have a bit of a delay. Most people know, and I forgot to remind you, I do. So it'll seem like there's a pause, and I don't mean to jump in here. But I think part of this, and I believe you will understand this as a teacher, right? I love teaching. I have set up nursing courses and taught them at the college, university level. Love it. But the one thing, and Leanne and I setting up this course together have talked about this, especially when we're teaching concepts about, if you will, the metaphysical. And we both have been in classrooms where, 90% of the class has an experience or is able to report back, whatever, right? They're teaching us about connecting to the other side through a meditation or what. And then invariably, there's always some that don't have the experience. They never experience something, then they start to doubt themselves and they don't think they should be there. But I was saying this to Leanne, and she agrees with me. I think our role as a teacher is to recognize that not everybody is the same, and to help these people, not tell them, but help them be able to understand what their doorway or pathway is to opening that door, if you will. So for you, and I know Asher's so evolved that he's trying to show you, maybe there's a different way for you that might work that you haven't found yet. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I'm running out of time now. I'm nearly 74.
That's young. That's young.
But no, seriously, I think we've more or less got our roles sorted out, and I'm here as the scribe and the questioner. And I think, in a sense, if I was just sort of shooting off into the realms with him and I was going out of body every night and we were having these wonderful experiences and that, I probably wouldn't be grounded enough to sit down and write it all out and keep a note on it. And he said, right when we started the first book, then A Mind Beyond Words, he said, a lot of people can go up into the clouds or whatever you'd like to call it, but they are not grounded enough to bring it down to earth and actually share it with other people. And he said, that's where you come in. And so he said, that's why we're a team. That's why we're working together. He said, I can get all this stuff. I can put it into your head. And I feel it just like a download, just going into my head. Krishum. And I'm writing down everything I can. And he's showing me all these little images and ideas and analogies and stuff to sort of help me get it right. And then I can share it with other people and pass it on so that they can use it. And it helps, I just got a new review for my book on Amazon today, and there was this man in America who was neurodivergent, and he said, actually, you just make, I can't remember the words he used, but he said, as a team with Asher as the experiencer and you as the interpreter, together, you've helped me understand why I have the issues I do with language and why spoken language just doesn't work for me. And I just thought, that is why I'm doing this, just for a person like that who's gone through his life. Why doesn't language work properly for me? It seems to be fine for everybody else. But yeah, so
I marvel at this, because the whole time, every time you come on here, and I just think this is incredible. And you've really explained something that I think is very important for human beings, because I'm finding we have to be careful with the words we use being on YouTube. But over the last 5 years, we'll say, I think that this is what's really helping us move on to the next level, or some people call it the ascension, is because people always accepted life as the way it was presented. And these last 5 years, I mean, there's a lot of relationships that ended, a lot of new relationships began, new ways of thinking, new careers. And people, I find, even with my own clients, are, why am I here? Why am I here? What is my purpose? It's not everyday life that I think 9 to 5, go to work, pick up the groceries, come home, cook dinner or tea, and then, watch a bit of television, go back to bed, and start all over again. People are feeling this calling, but I think one of the number one things that really helps people is they need to be more grounded as human beings. Most of us don't even know what it means. What's your thoughts on that?
I asked Asher that once, and he said, the way animals are, he said, they're grounded because they are in touch with the earth, the physical earth. They're in touch with other species, with the plants, with everything around them, with the sun and the rain, and they work in complete unity with all of that stuff. He said, we human beings have tried to sort of cut ourselves off from that, and then we stick ourselves in these little hermetically sealed boxes, and we sit with a screen in front of us, and we're trying to do this. But he said, actually, to be fully grounded is just to walk. It sounds cliche, doesn't it? You're sort of tree hugging and walking barefoot in the grass and all the rest of it, but it brings us back to Mother Earth, to planet Earth, to be part of this. And if you can keep like that, but keep a channel open to the higher dimensions as well, that's when you're a fully balanced being, and that's the state that we should aim to be in. So you can have people who are so caught up in everyday stuff that they're just sort of cut off from all their intuition and any sort of nudges that come from spirit. But if you can just keep that, he talks about it as a light body that goes right through you, up into the sky, right down into the depths of the earth, and that we draw on both equally, and that is a state of balance. So
I have to agree with you, because my belief, and I've taken an animal communication course. I'll give her a shout out. She'll probably be in the audience tonight, Julie Jean Bassett. I have taken her animal communication course. She's also a shamanic practitioner. This lady, I can't sing her praises enough. I had a groundbreaking session with her probably about 6 months ago that started to really heal something that had happened that was very tragic as a 4 to 5-year-old for myself, but also with my animals. Justin, my son, had a real connection to animals, especially cats. I even messaged her recently because Sophie was not doing well. Sophie just was, I could tell it was terrible, because animals do grieve. And the whole thing where I'm going with this is, I always wondered, why can I not connect to animals if I can connect to the other side? Both my boys could do it since they were little, and I realized I was getting in my own way. Plus, the other thing was that people kept trying to tell me how to do it, and I realized for me, it doesn't work that way. I just have to be open to the experience and make the connection. Right? And people can give you many different ways to do it. But the reason why I mention this is, I truly believe that young children and animals are always connected to spirit. I love what you just shared, what Asher said. But some of the other things I've also received from spirit is they live in the now. Like children, their work is play, especially young children, right? It's being they're not always happy, but that's a natural state of being for children, especially young children. They don't hate. They don't know these things, right? They're just present, and they're, if you will, grounded. And I love what you shared too, because I also teach this about having that open channel. I call it the invisible energy centers. Some people call them chakras, connecting to the center of the earth and running that light right straight up to, I say, up to the skies, the heavens, the universe, whatever you want to use. So I love the way you explained that. Asher has shared that with you as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. Wherever, you and I have never discussed this before, I don't think. And I've talked to people all around the world, and there's this I don't know, opening up, understanding, and more people are opening to it. And I think the non-verbal people, and they're not just autistic, some of them are Down syndrome, some of them are cerebral palsy, whatever, that for whatever reason they've chosen to incarnate with these compromised bodies that are such hard work to cope with, are here because they have got this work to do, which is lifting our vibration, which is helping us to understand more and to just tune in at a higher vibration. And that's such a valuable job that they're doing. And I just,
there are teachers, so if you're open to it, I always was a patient person, but I can tell you, and it's been both my children have taught me, infinite patience. I was actually very shy till I was about 16, believe it or not. I always say I haven't stopped talking since. The other thing is I've learned to stand up, to be an advocate, to be a voice, there's so many things I have learned from both of my children, but especially my youngest with the unique and special needs that he had. And he was here, I think, to be a teacher among many things. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe that that's some of the role that these special people play?
Yeah, I am absolutely certain of it. It might not be a teacher like sitting in a classroom and telling you stuff. And yes, some of them are trying to tell us by using their spelling boards and what have you. That's why I was saying earlier that Asher is sort of post-verbal, because he's almost got past that stage. He used to do that when he was in maybe aged about 20. He used to write these long articles. Every weekend he'd send me these sort of pages and pages and pages of email of, explaining this and explaining that. And it was always a bit of so dense. It was really difficult to get through, and he was trying every which way to get it across in words. But now he can just send me a astral envelope and it's there. But I think perhaps some of the people now who are using the spelling will eventually sort of evolve to, well, it's not them that needs to evolve, it's the people around them need to evolve to be able to take it all in telepathically. But to do that, they've got to be open to it. They've got to open their own minds to the other person, because Ash will often say to me, "Oh, I'm searching your mind for a suitable image." And just recently he wanted to show me something like how we as humanity we've been in quite a dark place for a long time. We've got more and more materialist and sort of mired in all the gunk, but it spirals around. And he says, there are, generation and generation and generation that go through this dark place, and then they start to move back into the light, which is where we're just emerging now. And he's searching around inside my mind, and then he said, "Yeah, I've got the image." And he went back to, you know how old I am. I can remember the Apollo space missions, okay?
Yeah, me too.
When I was a young teenager, I was absolutely besotted with that, absolutely the sort of leading up to the moon landing and all the rest of it. But the ones before that, where they send these people up, they get up to the moon and then they go into lunar orbit. And I can remember distinctly, and this is the memory he picked out, that they'd be chattering away to mission control, Houston, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're all the rest of it. And then they'd go behind the moon, round the dark side of the moon. And at that point, all communication went dead because they couldn't be heard. And there must have been about, 20 minutes, half an hour where there was nothing. And I can remember distinctly, all of us, sort of everybody on planet Earth who was listening into this stuff was like, oh, hope they're all right, because we didn't know what was happening. And then suddenly you get this little burst of static, and then you hear something a bit like a voice, and then eventually they'd come back and they'd be sending pictures of Earthrise, and, you'd see all these amazing things and hear them again. And he said, that's what our situation as humanity is like at the moment in 3D, that we've been going as deep as we can into the darkness, and now we're just coming to the cusp of where we're moving into the light again, and we're back in radio contact, if you like, with spirit. So yeah, that's how
I love it.
he
I love
reaches
it.
into my mind.
But you know what the beauty of it is? Like he said, he was searching your mind for something that you would be able to get the concept with. And most of us could get that concept. I was the first one I was born in 65, but I can remember in kindergarten, all of us being pulled out of the class and sent to the gymnasium to watch what was going on live. Yeah. So I remember this, and most of us could understand that kind of analogy. The way Spirit's shown it to me is, again, you take the concept of yin and yang, right? Or hot and cold, night and day. This is our 3D existence. This is being on earth here. And really the ideal place, from what Spirit has shown me, for a human being to be, would be perfectly connected to the light or source, running that light all the way through the middle of our body, down through our feet, into the center of the earth, being connected to the center of the earth. And we would have the perfect balance, the perfect yin and yang. And I almost feel like the universe is always moving that way. But the way Spirit's shown me, it's like a pendulum, right? And it is moving, but it's constantly moving back to balance. So as you explain that, it almost feels like we went too far to the dark. We've hung out there for a while, but we need to start moving back into the light.
Yeah. There's a million ways of expressing it, but yes, we're all on.
I love that he gave you that. That's perfect. Yes. Yeah. Give me one sec here. I always forget to do the station ID, and I should. I get so in depth in these conversations. Okay. So if you're just tuning in, you are listening to The Angel Rock. I'm your host, Laura Lee Potvin. This is I'm going to call her a fan favorite. It's her third show, and I hope she will come back for more, Jes Kerzen. And we are talking. I didn't put can you give us the name of your book? I had it written down. The name of your book again.
Yes, Jes? It's called A Mind Beyond Words.
Thank you. I can see the cover. It's so perfect because when I have a banner for this that I use, and it's very similar to not so much a book cover, but the whole concept. Anyways, you were listening to 105.3 FM out of Mississippi and 107.7 out of the beautiful city of New Orleans.
Sorry, it looks backwards, but that's what the book looks
like.
Yes,
I know the picture. And I think it's just, let me finish this one thing I was going to say. It's okay. UFO Paranormal and United Public Radio Network. And thank you for joining us. This is a new show, just so you know. It's not a repeat. And yes, that is the cover. But I don't know if it's your website or what it is, but I remember because I always make a banner for the show. And your first show, I was looking for something to illustrate telepathy, and it's two human figures, and where their head would be in the mind and the hair, it's leaves connecting. Is that, I forget, maybe it's the name of your website?
My website's called The Asher Tree.
That I knew there was something with it. I was amazed.
Yeah, and and that's another story that he gave me, which it's in A Mind Beyond Words, but it's a story to explain how he divided into the two parts of himself, but it's all about a beautiful tree growing up and just coming out of his heart and being this part of him that's able to share his metaphysical experiences with those of us who are more earthbound. Yeah,
I call that the Muggle world. So when I have people that work in the fields that we do, and then say they're doing this type of work, whether we want to call it spiritual or universal consciousness, whatever. But I always say our regular everyday jobs. I call that the Muggle jobs for people that don't follow Harry Potter.
Everybody knows what Muggles are.
So let's talk about remote viewing. Would you be able to, for people, I know what it is, you know what it is, but is there a way that we could describe what remote viewing is, say from Asher's perspective or even your own, so people who may never have heard of this, because there's a lot who haven't and are astounded when they find out that this is possible, remote viewing?
I love remote viewing because of all the psychic skills. You know, you can talk about telepathy and you can talk about presentience and channeling and all the rest of it. And people also say, yeah, but how do I know? Remote viewing is something anybody can try out, and you get instant and completely verifiable feedback, which is, it's so physical. And the way it works basically is that well, a good way to start anyway, two people and they're in separate locations, completely separate locations. So one of them will go to a location unknown to the other one. They'll maybe take their phone so they can take some photos, but they will just stand in that location and they will drink in all the sights, all the sounds, everything about the place for, doesn't have to be long, 10-15 minutes is ample. And the other person at that time is trying to tune into them in real time, trying to tune into where they are, just trying to pick up any ideas they can get. So person A, first person who's on location, takes some photographs of where they are. And then meanwhile, person B, who's doing the remote viewing, is drawing maps, drawing sketches, writing down any words, any ideas that they get. And then the two of them compare. And I mean, Asher and I live right across England from one another. I'm in the West, he's right over in the East in London. And so we're, 150 miles apart. But we used to do it week in, week out when we were still in verbal contact and talking on the phone and texting one another. We'd do it every weekend, every Sunday. I would go somewhere, and it could be a park, it could be an ancient building, it could be anywhere. I'd just choose somewhere and I'd go.
And you never decided, if I remember correctly from previous shows, you never decided beforehand. Didn't you even have a friend that you would ask them to pick a place for you to go?
Yeah.
I remember there was one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. No, I did that several times. Mm-hmm. And of course, once we'd mastered that and he was coming back with exactly not exactly what I saw, because he'd always see it from a slightly different perspective. It wasn't like he was looking through my eyes. If I was standing here, he'd sort of see it from standing a few feet away from me. So the way he'd draw it was from a slightly different angle, which I always thought was quite strange, because I'd have expected him to just sort of view it through my head. But he'd get the right place and he'd get so many hits that it was obvious. And then we got other people to take me to places and so forth. Then we started doing it. So I'd say, all right, tell me where I'm going to be in a week's time. And he'd write all his things down and see it all, where I'd be the following Sunday at 3:00 in the afternoon.
But you hadn't gone there yet, right?
I hadn't gone there. I hadn't decided where I was going. Sometime I'd get somebody else to take me somewhere, so I never knew where I was going. And he would get it right. Well, now we're working telepathically. Obviously, we can't go back to doing what we used to do, because if I went to a location and I said to him, right, tell me telepathically what I'm seeing, obviously I'm already seeing it. So I'd think, well, I don't know if I'm getting his message or if I'm just getting what I'm seeing. Yeah. So the only way it works for us now, if we still want to play that game, because it is fun, he has to do a viewing in advance.
Okay.
So I don't see it. So you happy if I tell you what happened in November? Because this was pretty spectacular. I thought it was great. So in my town, I live in a little market town in the southwest of England. And every year, towards the end of November, we have what's called a frost fair.
Okay.
And the frost fair is our big day of the year. It's really, really cool because they shut all the roads to traffic. People set up little stalls along the street and they're selling little bits of this, that, and everything. And there's mulled wine and mulled cider and snacks and street food and concerts going on. They set up sort of stages, as in every time you've got a cul-de-sac, there's a stage there and there'd be a band playing or a choir singing or whatever. And
I love it.
It's just the whole town just comes out and all the people from the countryside come in and we all just mill about and have a great day. And it's really, really fun. And I said to Asher, okay, so coming up, at the weekend, it's Frost Fair. So I said, pity you can't be here with me, but I said, perhaps you can do a remote view of what I'm going to see. And he went, yeah, I'll do that. And so telepathically, I think it was the night before I was due to go, he started off, and these are the things he gave me. I've had to write it all down because it's quite complicated. He said, you're going to, the first word I got was Carol. And I thought, I don't know anybody in this area. I know some Carols, but I don't know anyone in my area called Carol. And then I got the word singing. So I thought,
that's where I went when you said Carol.
No, I was just thinking of, I've got friends called Carol, but they don't live around here. So no, he was thinking Carol singing. So, and I thought, oh, that's odd because I live in, actually, my town is very pagan. It doesn't have a lot of churchy stuff or organized religion very much. And I thought, more likely to get a folk band, or we're more likely to get, carol singing is not something that happens much around here. But sure enough, I went into the Frost Fair and there was a stage at the top of the high street, and there was a community choir there and they were singing Christmas carols. And so, okay, carols, singing, fine, tick, we've got one. Another one he gave me was strange designs of triangles and zigzags in bright colours. Okay, I'll look out for that. So literally the very first stall I went to when I arrived at the Frost Fair was a little bric-a-brac stall that was just selling little bits of junk from here, there and everywhere, sort of kind of like antiques, but not quite that posh. And one of the things they had there was this picture about so big, and it was a painting of sort of African animals, but it was done in a semi-abstract way. And all these animals were created with triangles of different sizes in, bright sort of blues and purples and reds and all these bright colors. And then there was one creature that had a mane. I can't remember what it was, but the mane was just this zigzag that went all the way down it. And I thought, okay, yeah, that's another one we can check off the list. So that was two of the things. And then he gave me Kings, Kings, Kings. And that is another example of him picking my mind. Back, years ago, when my grandson was a little boy of 4, I took him to the Frost Fair because he was staying with me at the time. Yeah. And we have, I don't know how much this sort of fits in with Canadian society, but we have a mayor of our town.
We have mayor.
Yeah. Do your mayors dress up in funny clothes, or do they just look normal?
Well, depends on who's been elected, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, on special occasions, our mayor dresses up in a sort of tricorn hat, like sort of from the olden days, and great big velvet gown with sort of furry collar and a huge chain of office, great big gold chain of office. And it just happened that the guy who was mayor of our town at that time was an old mate of mine. And so I'm walking along with my little 4-year-old grandson, and we are getting back to Asher and the remote.
It's okay. I'm riveted.
So I'm just standing chatting to my mate, who happens to be the mayor that year. And my grandson is just standing there watching us both with his mouth hanging open. So,
Yep.
And then when we'd finished talking and the mayor went on his way to go, and sort of chat to other people, my little grandson turned to me and said, Grandma, was that the king? So I hadn't put the two together, but as I was walking on this particular day, the day that Asher had previewed, as I was walking past the town hall, suddenly I had to stop because the doors of the town hall opened and the present mayor came out in all the regalia, followed by a whole load of dignitaries who were also in that regalia, all dressed up in their finery, and they were parading through the town because that's what they do. That's what they get their kicks from. And I just sort of thought, kings, yeah. So that was that. So then there were two other things, and these are the two sort of strangest of the lot. He'd said to me I would see a place with a great log, and he'd cryptically added, you won't get any light from it though. So I was thinking, log, light. Is he talking about a log fire? Maybe I can see one in the hanging behind you. I was sort of thinking of that kind of image. Perhaps a log burning and light.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you'd think heat more than light, but anyway, I thought, well, I'm going past a lot of old medieval buildings. Perhaps one of them will have a big log fire burning, but I didn't see anything like that. And then I got right down to the bottom of town, and there was a stall, and they had a sign on the stall saying Yule logs. Do you have Yule logs over there?
Yeah. I've heard
okay. So some things translate across the pond and some things don't. So, so they were saying Yule logs, which are from a 500-year-old oak. And what the guy who ran the stall had done, he'd got these great big lumps of wood taken from this huge old oak tree that had fallen down, and he drilled lots of holes in it and put little candles in the holes. And he'd obviously had them alight because the wicks were blackened, but it was quite windy that day and all the candles had blown out. So a great log, and one of them was literally 5 foot long. I mean, we're talking big log, with all these holes in, with all these candles in them, but no light. And I thought, that was my great log, and there was no light coming from them. And I just took it at that and thought, that's a good hit. That's clever.
Yeah, that was clever.
Until I got home that evening and said to Asher, did I get everything? And I could just feel him laughing. And he said, what was in the log? And I said, candles. And he said, German. Now, Asher loves the German language. He loved it at school. It was his favorite language because in German, everything is exactly what they say it is. It's a very literal language. It's far less nuanced than English. It's just if...
Oh, I would believe that, yeah.
Yeah, so German is a very straightforward language and it suited his way of thinking. And so I thought the German for candles is Kerzen, Kerzen.
No way!
And it just absolutely made me hoot. And I could feel him giggling, and there was just this, you didn't get that one, did you? So
that's mind-blowing because I speak French, and I used to speak and read and write it like English. Still can read and write and speak it, but I also speak Spanish, read and write it. But I've had no one to practice it with. And they
Yeah.
both are the root of the language is from Latin, right? So I
Yeah.
can pick up a few words here and there in German, but not a lot. More Italian, Portuguese, things like that language.
Yeah, the sort of Latin-based languages have got a similarity,
I did
haven't
not know
they? I
about
know of the
candles,
same,
though.
but German is from a completely different
It
root, so it
is.
doesn't have very much of that in common.
Yeah.
It's a sort of real Nordic language, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could never pick up German very well, but Asher loved it. So yeah, that was that,
Mind blowing.
and then the very last thing was mirror. He said
Okay.
mirror and bending frames. And
Ooh.
so I was looking around for mirrors and well, there were mirrors everywhere. And I thought, well, it's weird he'd say mirrors because almost every stall had, either bric-a-brac mirrors on them, or there were, if they were selling like hats or jewelry,
But
somebody would
this
have a
was
mirror that you could look
distinctive.
in.
This was distinctive, the what he gave you.
Yeah, so I found some mirrors that were in sort of bent wood frames, and I thought that was what he meant. So I'd got me bending frames, and I thought, oh, that must have been it. But then I went further down the road, and there's this one shop in our town that most shops you've got lit windows and they're all decorated, and they were all decorated up for Christmas. But
Mm-hmm.
this one particular shop has this huge ground to ceiling window that's just black. It's got no lighting in, and
Wow.
they've got stuff inside the shop, but they don't window dress at all. They just
Mm-hmm.
leave it. And so it looks like a huge black mirror. And just as I was walking along the street, I just glanced at that mirror. And I'm not kidding you. As I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I could see a figure behind me who looked exactly like Asher.
No way. Oh my
And
God.
so I wheeled round really fast. There was nobody there who even, I mean, he is a big guy. He must be sort of 6'6", something like that. He's masses taller than me. He's a good foot taller than me. And he's quite distinctive looking. He has, characteristics that, and I've always felt he has the ability to sort of project astrally, because sometimes I've seen people walking towards me and I've been thinking of him, and it almost like I've seen his face superimposed on them, and then as they get closer they're nothing like him, and I think must have been imagining things. But on this particular occasion I could see him behind me. I turned around, I did a full 360 degrees. There was nobody in the vicinity who looked anything like Asher. And so when I got back in the evening, I said, did I see you in that comic shop window? And I just got straight back into my head. Yeah, I wanted to be there with you.
Aw. I love it.
So that was my experience of remote viewing, which we can
And
still
for
do
people
now.
that don't understand, sorry, I didn't mean to interject here, but I want people to understand Asher did this before you went there. So he had already known that you were going to run into these types of things, right? So it wasn't like you guys had done it at the same time or anything. This is a day before, the night before, you said. Plus, the other thing that people don't understand, and this is why, like, don't get me wrong, I would have chosen to have my son here forever. And in the first days when he left, there's a reason why I'm sharing this. The first couple of days I kept saying, why was your journey over? I now know why, right? He had done everything he could from Earth's side. The other side, he has more work to do. I've had a few people say he's going to be working with me from a guide perspective. But the other thing is, and I've explained this to people, and it kind of goes along with what you shared with Asher, right? We're an everlasting energy source, a soul, whatever you want to call us. And we're not limited by space, time, or body. We can be in many different places at the same time. And we're going to see our loved ones again. I truly believe that. Plus, I shared before the show, my son's made it very clear that he's been around here, not just with me. But where I'm going with this is Asher is so gifted that he recognizes that he can project his astral body if you want, and his consciousness, unless you've got a better word for it, he was there with you, right?
Yeah.
And we can
Yeah.
do this.
I know. And it's so magical, and it's just gives us a whole, I mean, I think, and I have to say this, you are incredible so soon after your son's passing to be able to carry on working like this and chattering away like this. And, you know, a lot of people would find that very hard to understand, but it's
But I
your,
work in this field. I
yeah,
always have. And don't get me wrong, I have my moments. And like I
of
said, if I
course.
had my way, and I've explained it this way off air mainly, that if I had my way, he would have been here forever. As a
Yeah,
mother, this rips a hole in your soul that will never, ever
oh,
heal. But I
absolutely.
also know my son would not want me laying in a bed crying and not going on with life. Plus, I know I will see him again. I know he is here with me. Not the way, if I could choose it from a muggle or human perspective. And yes, I am grieving him. I will never stop loving him. And like I say, I have moments, but I also think that we can learn from this too for others. I'm hoping maybe somebody hearing this, that it may also be able to help them too. I don't know if it will or not, but I'm
Oh,
hoping.
I'm sure it will. And what you said a little while back about him now being free to be your guide,
Mhm.
he hasn't got to deal with that human body anymore and all the density of being on the earth. He's a free spirit in every sense of the word, which
Mhm.
means that he will find so many ways of just coming in to help you and to guide
Mhm.
you, and you'll just feel his presence around.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the beginning of a huge journey for the two of you. And
Oh, I know my life is going to change in ways I had never expected, including I have many friends as well that do this type of work, and they've never told me what it is, but there's been little hints, and I've realized that because I would never have left him. Never, ever, ever. I have many opportunities, and my number one role was as his mom and his caregiver to be there for him, and
yeah,
I wouldn't leave him. And I think, yeah, I don't know what he's doing on the other side, but I have a feeling I may be doing some traveling this year. So we'll yes.
yes, I think you, yeah, and it's going to be an entire new experience for you as well, isn't it?
Mhm.
Because you've done that role and you've been a wonderful mother to him. You've been the mother he chose in spirit, and you've been there for him
Yeah.
every step of the way. And
Mhm.
that is, you know, I can tell he's so grateful for that. And it's just
Mhm.
so much love between you. But
I'm grateful for him for, like I said to you before before we were on air. I was told I'd never be able to have biological children at the age of 16. So the fact that I not just had one, I had two. I always say I won the lottery twice, and I've
yeah,
always said it's been I'm just so blessed that they did come into my life and I got the chance to be their mom. And I
yeah.
really appreciate I mean, there's not words. This is where telepathy could come in to explain it all much better than our human language, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I'm sure that's what will happen. I'm sure you'll have that. Well, you're already getting hints from him, aren't you? You're
Oh,
already
yes,
picking up
yes.
bits and pieces from him.
And
So
it's not
yeah,
just me, so it's not like, wishful thinking or something, and we talked a bit about this before we recorded this. It's other people that are it's irrefutable, it's unmistakable, right? Like,
yeah,
and so it's not just wishful thinking on my part, but I really am glad that you shared this remote viewing session that you had in November, in particular with Asher, and you shared that he was able to confirm that your eyes weren't playing tricks on you. He
yeah,
really was there.
yeah. I know, and I find it incredible because
Mhm.
he does. I mean, I haven't physically met up with him now for I don't even know how long it is. I've tried not to keep a tag on it
Yeah.
because that makes it worse in a way, but we must be talking 7 years minimum.
Right.
It's a long time. And it's not that we couldn't physically meet up. Of course we could, as just a sort of train journey or a coach journey or whatever. We could get together, but he doesn't feel able at this stage in his life to meet up with me. I don't know if he
You
just
get more done this way though than you would if you got together like most muggles, we'll call ourselves, do, because you're not impeded by language. And like you said, you get these, I love that word, that phrase, astral envelopes. Like, and the fact that you are so gifted, Jes, to be able to turn what you are receiving from the astral envelopes into a book or written word for other human beings to try to begin to understand.
Well, that's my job, and that seems to be my little bit of the puzzle. So we all do the bits we can, don't we? And I'm honoured to have that role. It's very exciting, and you're absolutely right. If we were together, we wouldn't be picking each other up mind to mind, because there'd be, the physical presence, and it's almost a distraction. So I'm sure, that's what his thinking is, and he prefers not to meet up that way. And I honour his choice that he just wants to stay in London and work with me this way. I miss him. There's no two ways about it. I'd love to see him again. I'd love to hear his voice again, but that's not the way he wants it to be.
I keep hearing that wouldn't be practical for him, right? He knows you have work to do. You are absolutely right. Because as you were speaking, and I've tried to explain this to people, that when I work with clients, less is more. Just give me a very general overview of what you would like to do today. Is it a healing session? Is it mediumship? Is it Akashic Records? Is it all? I'm open to it all. I try not to break it all down. But some people think they got to tell you more and more and more. And I keep saying, that's okay, or I won't read it. Because people I know, for example, it's so hard sometimes to discern what they've maybe told you before versus what you're receiving. Could you talk a little bit about that, maybe?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely the case. I mean, I've got a friend, a good friend in town here, who is a spiritual medium, and she's very good, and she reads tarot, and she can do fantastic readings, but she doesn't do readings for me anymore, because there's no point. We know each other so well. We've known each other so many years, and it would be so difficult for her to take me out of the picture. She just knows too much about me to be able to give a clean reading. It's much easier for some bod off the street to walk in that she's never met before, and then I'll watch her at work, and people will just be sort of saying, oh, God, how did you know that? And, but of course, with me, she knows most of it already.
That's just it.
She knows my life because we're such close friends. So,
But the beauty with Asher, you guys have had all these years to develop the relationship, but you're working in a different perspective, a different capacity, right? You're the scribe, and he's sharing this incredible wisdom with you.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, with your website, are you teaching people at all? Do you work with clients? Or tell us a little bit more about your work. Never mind that I know you got your hands full with working on the second book and everything else. What other kinds of work are you doing with these gifts that you knew everybody has, but you've made the link and discovered how they work?
I'm not doing any teaching, any workshops, and we get loads of requests. We get a lot of people, would Asher take me on as a student? Would Asher be prepared to work with me? And, through you if necessary, and that just isn't our way of working. And a lot of people would start up workshops and, the great teachings of Asher and all the rest of it. But he said, I'm not going to be a guru. We also get lots of letters from people saying, oh, can you tell me if I should split up with my boyfriend? Oh. Can you tell me if, if I ought to take this job? And I say to Ash, what on earth do I say to these people? Because I've got to write back to them. And he says, just be nice to them, be very kind, but say, That's why you incarnated, in order to solve those problems, in order to
Oh,
answer those questions for yourself. And it's that if you just go to your local, guru, and there's so many of them, isn't there? People who say, oh, yes, I'll tell you how to live your life. Oh, yes, I'll give you all the rules. Oh, yes, just follow my rules. And all the all the religious leaders, put on a funny hat and say, right, you've got to follow this way of doing it, and here are my texts and scriptures and rules, and this is, you do that, and then yes, you'll go off to heaven, nirvana, whatever, and everything will be hunky-dory. But that's just abdicating every reason for you being here. You might as well be a robot.
cheating.
Yeah, it is. It's just pointless, because the whole point, life is very difficult at times, let's say. I was going to use a ruder word, but it can be I don't know. So anyway, it can be extremely taxing, extremely difficult. We have horrendous problems that we've got to deal with, and it can feel like Ash's example is, you're in an escape room. You said you chose to be in this escape room, and you've got to figure your way out of it. And there's not going to be some nice guy sort of standing there saying, here's the key, out you go. You've got to work out the clues. You've got to sort out all the problems. You've got to work your way through this until you can get through. And that's a learning experience. And that is actually expanding consciousness, which is what we're here to do. That's why we've got this 3D experience, because consciousness is here to expand. It's not a static thing. It's not just like we're little puppets who come down and, act out all the parts. And then, when we've finished, we just sort of go back and say, hey, how did I do? I did all the things. And we've got to work out the answers. And if, we're finding it too easy, life will throw down a banana skin that will skid on, and then it'll be like, okay, we've got to sort this one out. And got to pick myself up and get back on the route. And
but the thing I think, right, is, so when I'm working with someone, and I'd mentioned this earlier, and they'll come to me and say, why am I here? What is my life purpose? Say somebody actually messaged me and wanted to book a session. I will tell them, I'm never going to tell you what your life purpose is. That is, if you will, the Christmas gift for you to unwrap. But I'm happy to help work with you through spirit for you to discover what your purpose is, right? Because you're right. We are here to experience, grow, learn. I love that Asher calls it an escape room, because I sometimes call it Earth School, but escape room's a really good term. And, I've tried to explain it as, and again, I don't know all the answers, I tell people, but what I've received from spirit, there are lineups of souls. I always call it in muggle terms, that can't wait to incarnate into this lifetime. Because I say this is the biggest, it's a difficult place to be born into, because you come in without, most of us, with spiritual amnesia. You come into these dense, heavy, fragile bodies. And we go through a lot in our lifetimes here. But if we got the cheat sheet, why bother coming? Right?
Absolutely. That sums it up perfectly. I love the cheat sheet. Yeah. But that's
I will never. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, we've had so many centuries of experts, religious leaders, leaders of countries, whatever, just telling you this is the way it's going to be. This is our rules. You follow the rules, you'll be all right. But I think people are really starting now to say, hang on, just out the way. This is my life, and I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to follow your set of rules. I'm not going to accept you as my leader and expert and the one who's telling me what to do. Some people still want to cling on to that. Some are terrified of actually doing things for themselves and actually making those choices. But that's the way we're going. I'm sure that's what this ascension, this shift, whatever we want to call it, is leading us into.
Well, my partner Del and I have had this conversation many times, and he says you take a small child, and a small child will ask why. And some kids around that 3-year-old age constantly, but why? But why? But why? It doesn't matter what you say to them. They keep asking, but why? And then he said, they go to school and you're told why. And you're told what this is the way it is, and this is what you do, and this is blah, 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 blah. Now, he's not saying go there and be unruly and cause chaos, but, it's often astounded me. And I use a lot of analogies myself. And I said, God forbid there's 300 people on a plane, it crashes, and you end up on this deserted island. And what invariably always happens is one person is not a follower. They're a leader. They've got some ideas and off they go. And most of the people follow. You might have two factions that go in two different directions, but it's always astounded me that people don't recognize you don't need someone to tell you what to do. Right? You have a brain and you can figure this out. You can work together, but you don't need someone to tell you what to do. And I think that's what people are waking up to, don't you?
I do. And how terrifying is that for the leaders, for the people who have made their life's work telling everyone what to do, telling everyone what to believe, telling them how to heal themselves, what medicines to take and what this, that, and the other. And
yes, exactly. And
no,
I think
it's a whole new ball game.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it's a beautiful thing. And, the same thing and I'm really honest on my shows, and I'll say to people, I don't even think the same thing, say, I thought 10 years ago, because as you learn and you grow and you evolve, and once we start to learn about, I always call this the other world. We always think life is life, right? And I don't want it to sound elitist, but once you understand, whether you want to call it the paranormal, tapping into universal consciousness, whatever it is, you realize how infinitely massive it is compared to what we may have been taught what life really is. And it's a beautiful thing because you're not limited, and you literally could sit down and learn every day something new, talk to different people, read different books, things that resonate, dig deeper, take a look, because everybody is different. And that's sort of what has come up a little bit in our discussion. I'm finding too, like maybe what will work for one person may not necessarily work for everyone, but there's many different roads that can take you to the end point, like say with telepathy, for example, or remote viewing or anything like that.
Yeah, I think just always expand your boundaries and be prepared to be a learner. Be prepared to learn more and more. I can remember as a teacher, donkeys years ago, some little kid in my class saying to me, "Why did you choose to be a teacher, Mrs. Kerzen?"
That's a big one.
I said, "Because I like learning." And it just sort of popped out of my mouth. And I thought that is the reason I chose to be a teacher, because no 2 days are the same and you're always learning something new. And quite a lot of the time you're learning from those little children in your class. And, they can be tiny tots and they're not all sort of psychic geniuses like Asha, but, even the run-of-the-mill kids, if you have such a thing, they've always got a different perception, a different way of looking at things. Even when I was working with preschoolers, they had amazing perspectives, and you just keep on learning. So yeah,
I love that. This went by so fast, Jes, and I'm going to put you on the spot, but I hope you can come back again because I know you got that new book, and I always have the most wonderful conversations with you. My audience loves you, but where can they buy your book? Have you got anything coming up? Anything you want to share with people? I'd love for you to share.
Okay, they can buy my book probably just about anywhere. It's in all the major booksellers. It's on Amazon, it's Barnes and Noble, and wherever they sell books. It's reachable. My website is www.ashertree.com, and that's got a newsletter that people can sign up to, where if you just hit the subscribe button, people get updates every month. We send out a message. He always telepathically dictates a few words, and then I sort of put in what's happening with the book, whether I'm doing any appearances, whether I'm selling the book somewhere. Your podcast will be mentioned on the next one, and yeah, all that sort of thing. What else? Yeah, I'm doing a book sale in my local town in March. I'm trying desperately to write this book. I
can't
think,
wait.
yeah, various things in the offing, little things sort of maybe coming up and maybe not. But yeah, it's all getting exciting and it's all fun, and we're having a good time.
Well, I love it. If you guys are enjoying what you're seeing, please stay tuned for the Lightgate with Dolly Saffron and Preston Dennett coming up right next. So next week on the Angel Rock, another guest favorite. You're going to see a few coming up because it's, we've had quite a few months in between when Jes was here, as well as Carmen Turner-Schott. She's an incredible astrologist. She's written so many books out there. Come, sometimes she'll do this on air, so come with your birth date and everything, and she's probably going to tell us about her new books. I wanted to get into a little bit that one of the books she wrote about was whether you're a phoenix or not astrologically, and I know she sent me the most beautiful message and told me I'm definitely a phoenix, and I thought I'm not going to ask about that. I'm going to ask more about that on air. So she will be with us next week on the Angel Rock. Please stay tuned on Thursday. I'll be back with David Hansel with the thing at the foot of the bed, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you ever want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me on Facebook.com/The Angel Rock. For now, I do have the course I've been promising that I'm working with my best friend on, Leanne Clark. It was going to be out in March, but with everything happening, I believe it's probably going to be the end of April, beginning of May. So stay tuned for that. Then I will have a domain name website. Otherwise, you can get a hold of me on any social media platform. It'll be either under Laura Lee Potvin or the Angel Rock. Also, I always forget, you guys, my YouTube channel isn't big, and I mostly use it to back up the shows. It's the Angel Rock with Laura Lee Potvin, or yeah, the Angel, that's what it is, yes. So I'd think about that for a minute. If you look under videos and you scroll down to the bottom, I have quite a few teaching videos there as well. How to ground and grid, how to create a love shield, why the power of music can really help you on your spiritual journey, and many things like that. So check it out. Also have two groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for more things paranormal, the Angel Rocker Tribe for more things spiritual, like what Jes and I were talking about. And David and I also have a group for the thing at the foot of the bed with Laura Lee Potvin and David Hansel. You guys can put show ideas, questions, post videos, photos, anything like that. And I also post the videos, because I forgot to mention this station does broadcast to every country in the world, but 80% of our audience is audio only. So that's where you can actually watch the videos and stuff that we post for the show that on Thursdays. Thank you again, Jes, so much for being here. I can't wait to come on again.
Oh, bless you. It's always such a joy to talk to you, Laurie. I really enjoy our chats.
And
it goes so quickly. You're right. It's very fast.
There's so much to talk about. Thank you, Asher, for being here. Jes has been able to share some of the incredible wisdom that you share with her telepathically. I love you all, and we'll see you on Thursday. Stay tuned for Dolly and Preston coming up.